Employees, what's the craziest reason a customer demanded a refund from you? I used to work at a medium-sized electronics store where the return counter saw more drama than the rest of the building combined, and the wildest refund request I ever handled came from a man who walked in holding a toaster like it was a live grenade. He marched right up to the counter, placed the toaster down with dramatic flair, and told me in a booming voice that he needed a refund immediately before someone gets hurt. Already, I knew this was going to be one of those interactions where the universe tests your patience, but I smiled and asked what was wrong with the toaster. The man leaned in and whispered that the toaster was haunted, which was not one of the typical defects listed in our return policy, but I let him continue. He said the toaster had been communicating with him, and I thought maybe he meant weird noises or electrical issues. But no, he claimed the toaster was sending him messages through toast patterns. At first, I thought he was joking, but then he pulled out a plastic grocery bag and revealed 3 pieces of slightly burnt toast, each wrapped individually like evidence from a crime scene. He laid them out on the counter one by one, pointing dramatically at the darker scorch marks and saying they formed symbols, and he was convinced the toaster was predicting the future. The first piece supposedly said, "Danger," even though it looked like random burn spots to me, and he insisted it had warned him the night before he stubbed his toe on his coffee table. The second piece allegedly had a shape resembling a bird, which he said was a sign because he had seen a pigeon on his windowsill later that afternoon. The third piece, however, was the one that truly terrified him because according to him, it showed the face of a man whispering a secret. To me, it looked like the normal uneven toasting that happens when you use cheap bread, but he was adamant the toaster was possessed. I tried to gently suggest that maybe it was a mechanical defect or uneven heating coils, but he insisted that he had consulted with a professional psychic on the internet who told him spirits often communicate through small appliances. By the time he finished, the customers in line behind him were trying not to laugh, and one teenage girl actually recorded part of the conversation on her phone. I told him I could inspect the toaster, and when I picked it up, I realized it rattled loudly inside like something was loose. When I opened the crumb tray, I discovered a small metal washer stuck inside the bottom slot that explained the uneven heating, but before I could say anything, he gasped and asked me if the spirit's anchor had been found. I said it was likely a piece of hardware that had broken off, but he shook his head and said, No, that's how they attach themselves." He demanded I perform some kind of cleansing before returning it to the store shelves, which was definitely above my pay grade, so I assured him we would handle it appropriately. Then came the part that made the entire interaction truly unforgettable. When I asked him for his receipt, he said, "I don't need a receipt because the haunting invalidates the warranty." I tried to keep my face neutral, but it was such a wild leap of logic that I almost choked. Our policy technically allowed returns without receipts if the item was in our system. So I scanned the serial number, and that's when I discovered the toaster had been purchased 7 years ago. Not 7 days. Not 7 months. 7 full years. I told him that unfortunately we couldn't refund items that old, but he insisted that the haunting had extended the warranty automatically because it made the toaster unsafe. He asked for a manager. So I called my supervisor, who walked over, listened to the story with the same expression you'd have while watching a raccoon steal food from your cat, and calmly told him we couldn't give a refund for a 7-year-old toaster. The man argued passionately that appliances should not communicate unless they are smart devices. And since this toaster was not Wi-Fi, enabled, the haunting counted as a manufacturing defect. My supervisor simply repeated that hauntings were not covered under any warranty we offered. The man grew increasingly frustrated and said he would leave the cursed object with us as a liability, but our manager told him he had to take it home because we couldn't accept items outside the return window. He finally stormed out of the store, toaster under his arm, leaving the 3 pieces of burnt toast on the counter like some sort of supernatural evidence file. When he reached the parking lot, he turned around dramatically and shouted, "You'll be sorry when it speaks to you too," which caused one of the cashiers to burst into uncontrollable laughter. We threw the toast away, sanitized the counter, and spent the rest of the day retelling the story to each employee as they came in for their shift. Rumor has it that 2 weeks later, the same man tried to return the toaster to a different branch of our store chain, but that manager told him the toaster wasn't haunted, it was just old personally. I still think about him sometimes and wonder if the toaster ever sent him another message, or if maybe he bought a replacement and now has 2 haunted appliances instead of 1. But one thing's for sure, it remains the single craziest refund request I've ever experienced in my entire retail career, and nothing has topped it since. I used to work at a giant electronics store that rhymes with West Guy, and out of all the unhinged customers I've met over the years, nothing, and I mean nothing, beats the guy who tried to get a refund because his TV betrayed him spiritually. And no, I'm not exaggerating for comedic effect, I wish I were. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind of slow shift where the only people browsing are teenagers killing time and elderly folks comparing air purifiers. When this tall guy in his mid-30s marched in carrying a 65-inch TV like it was both a trophy and a burden, he slammed it onto the customer service counter so hard the pens jumped. Before I could even greet him, he leaned in and whispered, "My TV committed emotional sabotage." I blinked at him for a slow 2 seconds because my brain needed time to reload. I asked, "Sir, what exactly do you mean by emotional sabotage?" And he launched into the most unhinged customer monologue I've ever experienced. He said that he bought the TV specifically to help him manifest positivity and achieve inner alignment, which was confusing because he had bought a mid-range budget model, not some luxury wellness product. He said the TV was supposed to play calming YouTube fireplace videos to help him heal his aura, but that it kept recommending things that did not support his journey. I assumed he meant normal algorithm stuff, but no. He insisted that the TV was intentionally showing him content that challenged his spiritual frequency and lowered his vibrational alignment. I asked him what kinds of videos it showed, and he dramatically whispered shark attack compilations and a documentary about serial killers and a clip of a raccoon stealing pizza slices from a trash can. I tried not to laugh, but the raccoon part almost broke me. He said that every time he tried to reset the recommendations, the TV defied him and asserted its own digital will. I told him as calmly as possible that YouTube recommends things based on general popularity and his watch history across devices. But he shook his head like I'd just revealed myself as an agent of some secret anti-aura conspiracy. He then claimed dead seriously that the TV was absorbing his thoughts. I asked what made him think that, and he said, "Every time I sit on the couch and think about my ex, the TV suddenly suggests breakup songs." That's not a coincidence. I told him again gently that it absolutely was a coincidence, but he slammed his fist on the counter and said, "No, the TV can feel me." At this point, a coworker walking by silently mouthed good luck and escaped. The man then demanded a full refund because the TV created emotional distress, adding that he no longer felt safe in his living room. Store policy allowed returns within 30 days, which would have ended the whole saga instantly. Except he'd had the TV for 11 months, and there was a giant dent on the bottom corner like he'd dropped it down a flight of stairs. I explained that we couldn't refund it outside the window, nor for physical damage, and he said, "The TV damaged itself by resisting my energy." I swear my soul briefly left my body when I reiterated the policy. He demanded to speak to a manager, and unfortunately, our manager loves chaos about as much as he hates confrontation, so he came over, listened to 1 minute of the guy's monologue, and immediately tried to bribe me with a soda to handle it myself. The man then said the most dramatic sentence I've ever heard in retail. "If you force me to keep this TV, you are forcing me to keep negative energy in my home." I calmly repeated the return policy, and he suddenly brightened and said, "Ah, a loophole." I was terrified. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a USB drive. I recorded the betrayal. He said, "I refused to plug in a random stranger's USB drive, but he kept trying to hand it to me like it contained sacred evidence." After 5 minutes of politely declining, he sighed heavily and said, "Fine, then I'll show you directly." He pulled out his phone and played a video of himself yelling affirmations at the TV, like, "I release toxicity," and the YouTube app recommending a video titled, "Top 10 Terrible Decisions Caught on Camera." He turned the phone to me slowly like it was a smoking gun. I honestly had to look away so I wouldn't laugh. Finally, after nearly an hour of surreal spiritual tech warfare, he gave up, grabbed the TV dramatically like he was rescuing it from a burning building and stomped toward the exit. But right before leaving, he turned around and said, "You'll regret this when the machines rise. This one is already awake." Then he walked out, bumping the TV into the doorframe on the way, adding a fresh dent. When the automatic doors finally closed behind him, my manager emerged from his hiding spot near the printer aisle and said, "Did he leave?" I nodded. My manager said, "Good. If he comes back, tell him I died." To this day, whenever my YouTube feed recommends something weird, I think of that man and wonder if somewhere out there he's yelling affirmations at a different TV trying to spiritually dominate the algorithm. And honestly, I kind of hope he is. I used to work at a mid-tier electronics store that tried very hard to pretend it was a luxury boutique, which meant we had the usual combination of confused elderly customers, entitled parents, and tech bros who thought owning one Raspberry Pi made them electrical engineers. But nothing prepared me for the refund request that still haunts my brain. It started on a Tuesday morning, the exact kind of shift where you're still half asleep. The music is too loud for 9 a.m. and you're convinced time has slowed to 70% speed. This woman walked in wearing oversized sunglasses indoors and a wide-brimmed hat like she was hiding from the paparazzi, except the paparazzi in our store were just bored cashiers scanning barcodes. She marched up to the counter, slammed a box on it, and announced, "This product ruined my marriage." I blinked, because the box was for a solar-powered garden gnome that we'd been trying to clearance out for months. I thought maybe she was in the wrong store. She insisted that I personally handle the refund because the stakes are too high to involve amateurs, which immediately let me know she was one of those. I opened the box and saw the gnome inside, looking innocent and cheerful, except someone had drawn Sharpie eyebrows on it that made it look like it had malicious intent. I asked her what exactly the issue was, and she launched into a story so dramatic it felt like a play. Apparently, she and her husband were having mild marital tensions, nothing serious according to her, until she put this gnome in their yard. She believed the gnome absorbed her husband's masculine energy. I didn't know what that meant, but she said it like it was common knowledge. She claimed her husband had been robust and virile before, but after the gnome arrived, he became emotionally distant, tired, and uninterested in yard work, which she apparently considered a major red flag. I gently suggested that maybe he was just stressed or tired, but she cut me off with, "No, the gnome drained him." I tried to verify if the gnome was defective, but she wouldn't let me touch it again because she said physical contact with it would taint my aura. She continued explaining that she had tested her theory by moving the gnome around the yard, strategically documenting her husband's mood each day, and concluded with absolute confidence that the gnome was siphoning life force energy through solar amplification. I opened my mouth to respond, closed it, reopened it, and then realized no sentence I could form would make this situation less bizarre. She demanded a full refund. Plus, emotional damages. I explained we do not offer emotional damages for lawn decor. She started to cry, telling me she had confronted her husband and he accused her of being ridiculous, which she said proved the gnome had gotten to him. At this point, a line of customers was forming behind her, all of whom were doing that awkward stance where they pretend not to listen, but are absolutely listening. I told her I needed a receipt, and she triumphantly held up a folded, sun-faded piece of paper that had been through what looked like 2 summers of winter, and maybe a mild hurricane. I scanned it, and to my horror, the system actually recognized it. But the date was from 4 years ago. I informed her that we only accept returns within 30 days, which made her gasp like I had announced the end of the world. She insisted that the gnome had only fully awakened recently, so the warranty should restart at the moment of awakening. I told her that was not how any policy anywhere in the universe has ever worked. She said she'd seen something like that on a YouTube video, which instantly explained a lot. She then asked to speak to my manager. My manager came out, heard the story, maintained an impressive poker face, and repeated what I'd said. The woman then threatened to bring this to the city council. My manager wished her good luck with that. She stormed out dramatically, leaving the gnome behind on the counter even though we hadn't accepted the return. When I tried to call after her, she yelled, "Keep it, it already has what it came for," and fled the store like she was being chased by an invisible force field. The gnome sat there for a full hour while employees circled it like it was a cursed relic. Our assistant manager finally picked it up and tossed it in the break room where it stayed on a shelf for months glaring at people. One guy claimed it made the lights flicker. Another said he kept losing pens whenever it was facing him. We joked about it draining morale energy. Months later, the woman returned looking calmer, sunglasses still on. She asked if the gnome was still here. We pointed to the break room shelf. She walked over, inspected, it nodded, and said, "I knew it. It latched onto someone else," then walked out again without taking it. We kept that cursed gnome until the store closed permanently 2 years later. To this day, I still wonder if the woman was unhinged, or if the gnome really was cursed. Because honestly, we all felt a little weird around it. And I swear on everything, the day we finally threw it in the dumpster, the power went out for a full 3 minutes. I'll never know if she deserved that refund, but I will never, ever buy a solar garden gnome in my life again. I used to work at a mid-tier electronics store, the kind that sells everything from off-brand Bluetooth speakers to TVs that always look brighter in the showroom than in anyone's actual living room. One Saturday morning, already slammed with customers and running on exactly 1 cup of coffee too few, I saw a man stomping toward the service desk with the kind of determination that immediately tells you he believes he is the protagonist of the universe. He was carrying a microwave, not in a box. Just the microwave itself under one arm, like a newborn. He resented. He slammed it on the counter so hard the pens rattled. Before I could even manage a good morning, he barked, "I demand a refund for this dangerous piece of garbage you people sold me." I asked what was wrong with it, and he puffed himself up like a bullfrog, saying it nearly killed him. Now, when a customer says a product almost killed them, you mentally prepare for possibilities like electrical sparks, burning smells, strange noises, stuff that actually could harm someone. Instead, he leaned across the counter and whispered, "It stole my food." I blinked because I thought maybe he misspoke. He had not. He explained with complete seriousness that he put a frozen burrito into the microwave, set it for 2 minutes, walked away, came back, and the burrito was gone. Just gone, vanished. He said the microwave atomized it with radiation. I opened the microwave door, and it was suspiciously clean. Too clean. No crumbs, no wrapper. No evidence that food had ever existed inside it. He crossed his arms proudly, like this proved his point. I started asking clarifying questions. Was he sure he put it in? Did someone else in the house take it out? Did he possibly eat it and forget? He scoffed, like I just asked if he believed in gravity. No one else was home. He said, "And I don't sleep-eat. The microwave vaporized it. I could smell the ions." I was trapped between professionalism and the overwhelming urge to ask this man if he understood how microwaves work. He demanded a refund for emotional distress and also insisted that we compensate him for the lost burrito. I explained store policy, no refund unless the unit is defective, and certainly no reimbursement for missing lunch items. That's when he dramatically pointed at the ceiling security cameras and said, "Check the tapes, you'll see it disappear." Against my better judgment, I actually called security to pull the footage, mostly because I needed to understand what level of chaos I was dealing with. We reviewed the camera feed from the small break area in his home appliance aisle where we demo microwaves, but obviously it didn't show what happened in his kitchen. He then accused us of colluding with the microwave industry. At this point, my manager stepped in, trying to gently de-escalate. The man insisted he had been robbed by technology. Then came the plot twist. His wife walked in. She looked exhausted, like this was not her first trip down whatever conspiracy lane he liked to wander. She immediately said, "Oh my God, Gerald, I told you already I ate the burrito." Gerald froze, processing betrayal. She explained she'd come home early from her shift, saw the burrito in the microwave, and ate it because she thought he'd made it for her. She assumed he'd remember and didn't think it mattered enough to explain. Gerald turned bright red, not embarrassed but defensive, and replied, "Well, you should have left a note." She shot back, "I didn't think you'd accuse the microwave of vaporizing your food." Meanwhile, customers in line behind them started quietly laughing. Gerald, cornered by the truth, pivoted like a politician caught on camera. He said this new information changed things, but insisted the microwave still had suspicious energy. My manager offered to test it in-store to ease his mind. We put in a cup of water, ran it for a minute. And like all microwaves on Earth, it heated the water. Nothing exploded, vanished, or teleported. Gerald watched the entire demonstration, narrowed his eyes, and muttered, "It behaves when it knows it's being watched." His wife looked ready to file for divorce on the spot. After 15 more minutes of arguing with himself mostly, he finally gave up, grabbed the microwave, and stormed toward the exit while shouting, "This isn't over." His wife apologized with the resigned sigh of a woman who has absolutely asked herself more than once, "How did I end up with this man?" The funniest part. 2 days later, he called the store asking if microwaves can develop selective targeting hostility. I politely told him no. He said, "Good, because it burned my popcorn today, that's more like it." And that to this day remains the wildest refund request I've ever dealt with, because the microwave didn't fail. The marriage did.